Get down from the chopper.
Yeah, nice sound. Again, just my preferences, me playing around, coming up with combinations as I would do with real microphones on a real session. And that is really what we're all about with this product. This is about recreating the experience of being in a real recording environment, putting microphones in front of a cabinet, and the sound that would come back on that channel from the microphone, exactly what you're going to get from our profiles of those microphones. And the quick starts are really just there to show you, right, if you combine a few, then you can get some interesting things going on. We're going to give you loads of extra info on that in another video, as I say. We'll do a whole video just on combining them. And then another one on the more advanced sort of mic techniques and
ninja
stereo and phase relationships. And it's all in here, okay? So, but I don't want to, there's too much to put in one video. So we're going to just go through the sounds in this one and talk about the mics and the positions. So that's it for the quick start. Now let's just go right into the list of the discrete mics. So, like, I know we talked about there not being many. I absolutely believe that I'm justified in the context of what you'd find in a typical impulse response pack versus the possible, like, combinations of sounds you'd be able to create with these raw materials. It's almost unlimited. I would go as far as to say anything that you would normally want to do, you know, on a normal session with a Greenback and a cabinet full of good mics, you're going to be able to do with these raw materials, right? So it's really simple concept. What I've tried to do is keep a kind of common language here that we will use for each of these packs that we do. Now, they're not always going to be the same mics. And as I've said, I want that license to use the best sounding mic on the day, rather than us say, oh, it's always going to be an SM57, it's always going to be a U87, it's always going to be a Royal 121. I don't want that, okay? If it's the right one, it will be that. But if there's something that I like the sound of more, then it will be that. And so we will make a little pact, you and I, okay? I'll always choose the best sounding mic, and you'll always choose with your ears.
Yeah.
And
just
that can't go wrong, right?
Just enjoy playing guitar.
Exactly.
Not fiddling and
so
picking.
I will call these as they are in the pack, and you will hear the characteristics of them, and hopefully that will then lead you to understand exactly what the design is of this kit and what it's all about. We're going to start with dynamic mics. Dynamic 1, and so what you've got is the name of the microphone and the position that it's in. Remember our diagram, the picture of the cone, the cap in the middle, the edge of the cap, the cone, which is the big paper area that does the majority of the moving of the air, and the bit between the two where they join being the cap edge. So these are the only things that you're really going to hear other than distances, okay? So just take it for granted when you see cap, edge, or cone, that means that they're right up close to that. And the other positions I'll explain that have distance, I'll explain those as we go through them. So for one microphone here, dynamic 1, there are 4 positions. It's all you need. A microphone that is dynamic in nature is suited very specifically to picking up things that are very close to it and very loud. That's their forte. Although you could use them in other places in other ways, you're effectively using them in a suboptimal way at that point. And there are other mics that would do that job better. And so those are the ones you'll find have those distant positions, or further away or whatever. So the dynamics, the 2 dynamics that we have in the pack, each represent kind of a sonic territory of their own. One of them is very mid-focused, which is great for guitar, especially for overdriven guitar. And that has its 4 positions as center of the cap, that exact same position, but off axis, the 45 degrees, remember? The edge of the cap where it joins the cone, and that same position off axis. Okay? That's important when we go into the combination video, and you'll see why. There are loads of, I guess you call them standard methods that involve combinations of on and off axis in the same position. And you'll see how those work really well. But those realistically represent the focus of your dynamic microphones around the center of the speaker where they are most effective. When you start getting out into the edge, into the cone, into the distances away, much better to let your dynamic and ribbon mics take over at that point. They're going to do a far better job of picking up those frequencies because they're far less directional. A dynamic mic is think of it like a laser pointer. It only really picks up a tiny thing in front of it. The patterns, the names of the patterns and what they mean.
It's crazy. You just listen to on and off access and you can hear just
tiny movements.
Subtle change.
Tiny movements, yeah. Changes. So what you're doing when you're creating, for me, when I'm creating these profiles, I'm looking for the best version of that particular position. So when I say cap, I mean probably right in the center as much as possible. I will move it around a bit as well until I hear that really nice balance. I'm looking for a balanced representation of a bright sound in the center. On the edge, you want a bit of both. You want to get a bit of the sound of the cone, a bit of the sound of the... So it will be not... I'm not doing it literally forensically, like measuring it. Oh, that's exactly, it's in that area and it's at the best sounding part of that area. All by ears. You cannot go wrong if you use your ears. I know this is going to maybe be counter to what maybe some people say, you always put it exactly here, or, you draw a circle and you measure it. And
it's going to be different if you're in a different size room. That's going to change it, right? You can't, it's not.
I use my eyes use my eyes to begin the process, and I use my ears to finish.
To walk into the room and not to knock into things.
My eyes to pick up the mic that I want and put it roughly in the place that I want. Yeah. And beyond that, it's all about how it sounds. Okay, so Dynamic 1 cap, as you would expect, this being a mid-focused mic pointing directly at the center of the dust cap, this is going to be pretty bright sounding, yeah? It's kind of a classic sound. Any recording engineer is going to know immediately what that mic is, but that's not the point. So what I've done is choose a counterpoint for this, a foil, if you like. For Dynamic 1, it's another dynamic microphone that's a huge favorite of mine, and it's kind of like, I guess, an upmarket version of the 57. It has a more extreme sound. I don't mean that in a like extreme. It's more highs, more lows, and more balanced, I guess you could say. It's less peaky in that mid-range, particularly around the 7K, the upper mid-range, and high frequencies, the very middle-focused sound. Dynamic 2 in this pack is all about more of a balance. Something that would be much more useful on, say, like a clean sound. So you want to get a bit of the roundness, a lower and a higher sparkle as well. So if you listen just to the difference, we'll do a quick swap here between Dynamic 2 on the cap and then Dynamic 1 again. So again, I've deliberately chosen a microphone that everybody wants and something else that's different enough from it to be useful. So it is, when you look at the way Dynamic 1 works, it's all about the mid-range. Dynamic 2 is spreading that out, giving you some low end, some high end, a bit more of a kind of more balanced representation, if you will. And again, if you're doing something that's clean, we take a bit of the gain away. Then it starts to become more interesting, because immediately you may listen to a high gain Marshall sound like that through a Greenback, and a very specific microphone is going to pop out and sound to you like, oh, that's the one, that's the natural choice. And that's all very well if that's the sound that you're going for, and maybe that's correct. But if it's not, and you're trying to do something different, people get very focused on this idea that, a speaker is good for one type of music. Like a Greenback is good for classic rock. It's not good for metal. Or like, if you want to do metal, you only should use a Vintage 30. And that pigeonholing is like, you're missing out on a whole lot of beautiful sounds. If you start digging into the way the speaker responds and combining it with different microphones that have different characteristics, there's actually nothing you can't do with any speaker. It's all about capturing it in the right way. These are huge differences that you get between the sounds of these mics and the positions. Huge enough for you to take something from one style of music to another, but arguably from one era to another. Really just show you here the difference between Dynamic 1 and Dynamic 2, just to get this concept across of one of them will be the natural choice, The other one will be a nice foil for that, something that's a different angle maybe on the sound of the speaker, something that will allow you maybe to get better results if you're going for a different type of sound than is traditionally associated with that speaker, right? Yeah. So quick comparison, and then we'll move on. Dynamic 1. So this is now with a clean sound, just so you can hear, like, because we're trying to go into something slightly different. Cleanish. We now go on to Dynamic 2 in the same position on the cap. You know, maybe in the case of the full distorted sound, you prefer Dynamic 1. Yeah. And you start getting into that clean territory. Personally, for me, I'm like, oh, no, I prefer Dynamic 2. It sounds better. So that's the whole idea of the two, right? One's a natural choice. The other one is like the nice alternative that allows you to get out of the rut of doing the same thing all the time with the same speaker. So with that done, let's move on, just go through these now. And I shouldn't need to explain that concept again because it's the same for all of them. Each mic, there's a pair. Natural choice, nice foil, okay? So dynamics, we've done 1 and 2. They've each got their positions, 4 positions. Center of the cap, off axis, the same position. Edge of the cap where it meets the cone, off axis, that same position. Now we go into the condenser mics, which again, there's 2 of. One is a natural choice. There's no cap center for these because it sounds suboptimal for me on a condenser. If you want the center of the cap, you use a dynamic. So what we've started with on the condensers is the cap edge, the point where they join the cone. Gone right into the cone now with the condenser, and then added 2 new positions as well, which I'll explain. So the cap edge on condenser 1. Really, you get a very different character from a condenser mic. It picks up much more of what's going on around it, not just that laser pointer of that spot on the speaker. It
feels like you're getting a lot more coming back in.
Yeah, exactly. So the cone, again, you're getting away from the middle now into the kind of the big wide area of the speaker. Now, in some outlying cases, it may be that that's the tone you want.
Yeah.
Possibly. More likely, though, with the cone positions, it's something you want to combine with another mic that does the other part of the sound. So you're finding the cone sound that really matches well with maybe the kind of cap sound that you like, right? That's simplifying it, but it's a basic concept that these are kind of building blocks. So for both your condensers, you have those. One thing that will be immediately apparent, though, is you've got 2 positions that are new now that were not on the dynamic mics, and that's because these are where condensers, again, are much more suitable. We have a position called front. Now, front is 1 meter away from the cabinet and deliberately not out of phase, but phase misaligned with the main front position, the close positions on the cabinet. This will become evident later when we start talking about how we combine. Having things that aren't perfectly in phase can be really interesting. And actually, there's an awful lot of recordings that have been made where the phase wasn't perfect, maybe by mistake or whatever, but it became iconic sounding. And it's something that's familiar and interesting. Sometimes if you just want to get away from everything's perfect, it can be useful. But we're not going to go into that in this video. It's for another one. But for you to know, what front means is 1 meter away in front of the cabinet. So it's not pointing really anywhere on a speaker when it's that far away. It's just pointing sort of right bang in the middle of the cabinet. Yeah. What you call the null spot, which is between the speakers. It's typically where you would do that kind of a position. It sounds kind of like you're standing in front of it, right?
Pretty much everyone at a recording session stood in the room, nodding.
Yeah, as you'd expect. I mean, if you were a meter away from a cabinet listening to it, it's not the same as having your ear like right in front of the cone. Actually, that sound that you're used to hearing on a recording is very unnatural in real physical terms. I hope you never put your ear right next to a speaker cone at that volume, because you wouldn't be hearing much for long. But, you know, this is more natural, and by that I mean more like what you would hear standing in front of it, right? But also nice to blend. But it'll do funny things with the phase. That's intentional. And as I say, we'll explain that later when we go into the combining video. So the final position that you have on your condensers that you don't have, again, on the dynamics, because it's really not a good idea, is the room. And that means right at the back of the room. Okay, so it's the rule of thirds have been observed, again, for phase coherence where it's important, particularly when we start talking about doing coincidental pairs, Blumline pairs, and all that lovely Bruce-Swiddian stuff, which is all in here for a third video. Even the advanced stuff, we'll talk about that, and stereo and all those kind of things that you can do with this. The room position is kind of like the ideal. It's 2/3 of the distance up the room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your sound source is at one end, your room, divide it into 3, come back in 1/3. The reason that's ideal is if you have any standing waves at all, and this room that we've recorded in is very well treated, so it's not a huge issue anyway. But if you do have standing waves, the least likely place they will be is 1/3 of the distance away from a wall, because they typically bounce and combine in the center. They bounce from the source, hit one wall, and they will be equal distance where they combine. So if you're a third away, it's not actually mathematically true to say there wouldn't be any. They could very easily be standing, but they'll be minimized compared to right in the center or right on one edge.
There's some logic.
I mean, it's the rule of thirds. We follow that. It's an engineering rule. So you're more likely to get a nice natural sound without any peaks in the frequencies. So here is condenser 1, right in the right spot. It should be in the room. It's in the room.
Yeah.
Pretty weird on its own.
Yeah.
But when you start adding that to other sounds,
to other things, that's what's going to bring it to
you're
life.
going to get this real sense of space. And again, that's missing from so many records. They don't impart the sound, whether it wasn't a nice sounding room or it wasn't captured. It's huge. You listen to Queen, yeah? You listen to AC/DC, any of these bands, and particularly Queen, Brian, because they discovered ambience in their career at a particular point, and then it became their sound. And, you know, the room is so important. It's one of the few things that will make it all the way through the mix and into your ears right at the end, regardless. You get the sound of the room into it, becomes part of the DNA of the sound, and it's almost the most important thing if you ever want your sound to be big. If it doesn't sound like it's making reverberations in the space, it can never sound big to your brain. It's just not possible, right? So there we go. That's condenser 1's room position, and it sounds different to condenser 2. It's a different mic. Obviously, when you get into the room, the differences are harder to perceive. But if I give you position cone or cap edge, so the close-up position on 1, very flat response, that mic. You can guess what it is. And then if you do the same thing with condenser 2, you'll hear, much like with dynamic 1, dynamic 2, it's a brighter representation. It's a bit more detailed.
I like that.
It's also a little bit less good at capturing the volume. So it's actually cracking slightly, condenser 2, and that's on purpose. It can be a nice sound. It's something a little different to the perfection of condenser 1. So that's the same thing. You've got the same thing going on for both of the two condensers, those 4 positions. Cap edge, which is the joining place, the sweet spot, and I call it that for a reason. It really does sound lovely. The cone, which is where you would want to get that low end and warmth that you could blend. Condensers much better at picking that up than a dynamic, because they're not so directional, so they get more of the big cone. This is a big area, right? And then you've got the front position, which is the 1 meter away in the space, again with intentional phase misalignment that we will come to play with later and will be great fun. And then you've got the room, which is back in the room. So there's one more microphone type, which is ribbons, and they have one extra profile type for a very important reason. A ribbon is a figure 8 pattern microphone. And what that means is, imagine it like a flat diaphragm. When you have a traditional condenser mic with a cardioid or a hypercardioid or supercardioid pattern, if you imagine it creating a dome in front of it, that it picks up the sound. It's quite wide, but it picks up things in front and typically has a null zone behind, bit to the side, but basically front. Now, the ribbon mics that I've used here, both of them are figure 8 mics, which means they pick up sound equally from both sides. And that has fantastic properties when you want to do things like creating coincidental pairs, Blumline pairs, creating stereo from a mono mic source. All the things that the masters did to create that sense of space. and we'll get into it again later in another video. But ribbons have a very particular quality about them. They are huge. They're ribbons of metal, and they pick up sound. They're quite sensitive. You have to be quite careful with them because they're very brittle. They can be broken easily. So if I play you just a couple of the sounds from the two ribbons, you'll get a feel for what's different about them. So this is a real classic ribbon mic. Very often would be combined with something like Dynamic One. Because it's got a lot of low end, right? A lot of low end with a very bright center mic, and you end up with this really nice round picture.
A little bit of room.
It's a classic, famous combination.
Yeah.
Dynamic One, ribbon one together, all day long. Great combo because it brings the low end back into the sound in a nice warm way. There you have the cap edge, you have the cone, you have the front, just like you do with the Dynamics, and a room, just like you do with the Dynamics. Pretty weird.
It's just behaving like you're in the room.
Pretty weird on its own. And then ribbon 2, which is a very different sounding ribbon, much bigger, much warmer sound. Less of that like extreme low end focus with the kind of real sub bass thing going on. Ribbon 2, I mean, if you take ribbon 2 as a front position. Cool sound. Again, kind of in the room feel. But, okay, so the last profile of the microphone type we have here is what's called room off axis. So, we said ribbon mics, figure 8, they pick up in two directions.
Yeah.
So, if you're pointing them at something, they'll pick it up and they'll pick up what's bouncing off the wall behind them. The off axis position, what it represents and how this will be useful is apparent in later video where we go into the advanced stuff. But imagine that that's your microphone. It's pointing at the source. It's picking up the sound coming back and the things that are coming in from behind it. Now, off-axis for the ribbons is this. Exactly the same position.
It's going to take it from
turned through 90 degrees. So now it's picking up from beside.
Now you're getting...
Yeah. So when we get into the advanced mic technique stuff, having that... And one thing that's really great about this, okay, this is where we get into this is better than reality situation. If you want to create a Blumline pair or a coincidental pair, you need two mics that are the same, as close as possible. You used to have to buy matched pairs. It cost a lot of money to get two expensive mics that are very close, sound close to each other, right? And sometimes you'd have to buy and sell them.
Yeah.
And a lot of the studios used to do that until you get one that's a good match.
Shaking them.
If it's something that you do regularly, you really wanted that, right?
Yeah.
If you ever watch any of Bruce Swedian's videos about his mic collection, and he's a master of this stuff. You listen to Man in the Mirror or all the Michael Jackson stuff. He's all about capturing natural ambience.
Yeah.
And if you're even slightly interested in mic technique, go and buy his book. You will not regret it. It's a masterclass. He literally wrote the book. It is the book on mic technique. But anyway, going down a rabbit hole there. But if you want to get into the stuff that he used to do, and a lot of other people since, because it was just so influential on all of us engineers, then you're going to want these off-axis positions. But why is this better than reality? Because we can use the same mic in the same exact physical location in space and rotate it to create the second profile, which, of course, defies the laws of physics. There's no way you can do that in reality in real time. So it sounds...
somehow manage to crush a microphone together, not break everything, and allow it to stay in place.
If you made a microphone that somehow was two diaphragms, but again, the physical intersection would change the sound.
Yeah.
This is literally the idea. It's better than real in that respect, that you can't do it in reality. So it's going to be the kind of the ultimate version of that technique, because it's allowing you to have the same diaphragm, the same microphone in the same physical space, doing both positions. So you get perfect phase coherence, and the sound is really, really great. And so Anyway, another video, another time. But that's what the room off-axis position means for the ribbons. You only have it for ribbons, not for condensers, because it needs a figure-8 microphone for it to be useful. And the two ribbons, in this case, both are figure-8 mics. They have different characteristics. So when it comes to picking up the room and reproducing some really cool positional audio, like moving the sound around the room and that kind of stuff, you'll be able to do that because you've got the raw materials that you'd need. So there's one other thing, and you'll notice that I've been talking about microphones and how that was the last microphone position. That's for good reason. There is this thing called the Neutron Sub. Now, this is something that we've designed and built, and it's not a microphone. It is a 100% tactile transduction device. And what I mean by that is it directly converts physical movement into frequencies that it then records. So it's not like a microphone. This is apparent, particularly because it's designed to pick up very low sub-bass frequencies inside the cabinet. All right? It's particularly important for two reasons. It's very difficult to pick up very low bass frequencies in the kind of sized room that sound great for guitar cabinets. And by that, I mean you don't want a room that's too big because you want to capture ambience but not reverb, so that you can impart that character on the sound and not have it be some really long reverb tail that then stops you being able to add reverb in the mix. So the kind of ideal size is about where we are. It's about 0.2, 0.22 of a second long, the ambience. It's like the perfect guitar recording ambience length. In a room that size, picking up low sub bass is very difficult because the wavelengths are so long, meters long, right? By the time you get down to the really low sub stuff, that it has to bounce around the room. And if you're lucky,
you're never going to get it
just
clean.
Happens to go into a microphone, that's this
it's
big.
Like, I've got it.
I mean, there are ways that you can do it. They are convoluted, but it's possible. If you get on your hands and knees, right, and you walk around the room on your hands and knees until you hear the frequency you want.
Yeah.
And put either the sound source or the microphone there.
Oh, man.
You can do that.
You're not doing it.
Anyway, so we've designed this device so that it directly captures the movement of the coil and the vibration of the cabinet and turns it specifically directly into low frequency audio. This is going to sound weird. Bear with me though, okay? Remember what we said at the beginning of the video. Microphones and combination of microphones are infinitely superior to EQ.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. In modern music, we're more and more incorporating bass and sub-bass into our records, into our mixes. We're more used to hearing it. This is a byproduct of an old age where we had vinyl records. You couldn't put lots of low sub-bass onto a vinyl record because the needle would jump out of the groove, right? So historically, it wasn't really part of the recording process. It was cut away. As digital reproduction has progressed and people have gotten used to that as a medium, and the mastering process has kind of grown up with it too and learnt that they can incorporate more sub and low frequency in the recordings, it's become more normalized, and guitar sounds have followed that trend. And what typically people then have done is taken these kind of thin sounding mic positions and boosted them with EQ to get the low end that they want, which creates all kinds of problems in the mix, right? So we created the Neutron Sub device specifically to counter this issue, to allow you to have real weight and low end sub in the sound
without competing
of any speaker. Again, really important. You don't use this speaker because it doesn't have enough bass. Is no longer an issue. We have this device is there to solve that problem. So you can always have as much or as little bass as you want coming directly from the vibration source. So it's true to the speaker and what it's reproducing, but without the limitations of needing to be able to capture those huge wavelengths with a tiny microphone diaphragm. Yeah. So it's kind of like, unlocking, I guess, a new set of possibilities with every kind of speaker, that you can now access the real low frequencies without the kind of boominess and unpredictable spiky behavior that you'd get using an EQ to do it. It's going to be,
in and
again,
dipping and
smooth.
And the side chain and all of that jazz.
It's been created by a loudspeaker, not as in a loudspeaker, the physical terminology of what it is. The volume of it is loud, and the natural process of evening things out applies just as much with low frequencies as it does with high, if not more. It takes more energy electrically to reproduce a low frequency sound than a high frequency sound by a factor of hundreds to one in some cases. We
it's
get
massive,
to the
like
extreme.
yeah.
So sounds pretty weird on its own. Let me give you now my last little takeaway from today. Okay, I'm going to just double this track for you, and we're going to put just a dynamic 1 on the cap on one of them, and I'm going to bring the sub up on the other, so you can hear how this now gives you a completely new type of control that you would have really struggled to do with EQ without really destroying the sound in phase terms. And I mean that really technically, and how useful it would be in a mix if you tried to do this with an equalizer. And I wanted particularly to listen to what happens to the high frequency notes when you combine them with the sub. I'm going to over accentuate it just for this example. So just to calibrate your ears a bit again, I'm going to label this track so I don't lose where I am. Which is which? This is the first one because it's big. There we go. So this is the sub. All right, and this is dynamic 1. So we just solo this up. Okay, so there's a dynamic microphone, center of the cap, first position you heard. Okay, ears calibrated. Here comes the sub.
You feel the difference. So you might not have the same genetic makeup as me, but feeling your cheeks when you've got the sub on versus the other one, it's like you can feel it.
Listen to the bass on these high notes.
It hit, yeah.
You could do that with EQ.
Yeah.
But now listen to the bass on the low note. Now, if you did it with EQ, the low notes would be going really boomy and loud and bassy, because in order to get that amount of bass on such a high note in your frequency range, you'd be boosting the low end so much because it's linear, right? It's an equalizer.
12 different layers.
You can't add that frequency to the high notes without exponentially adding loads of it to the low notes, because that's the way linear EQ works. This low stuff, it's thick because we've got a lot going on, but
it's like peanut butter.
I love your descriptions.
It's like peanut butter.
It's great. Okay,
like that.
Exactly. It's like peanut butter. Bassy peanut butter.
It is.
They're definitely crunchy, not smooth.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, if you hear the sub on its own, you can kind of hear that going on. Listen to that weird thud on the high notes.
Yeah.
But the low notes aren't louder because it's not a linear EQ. This is a non-linear representation.
You're like, you stay there, right where I want you, and you're there, and then, I don't want to, rather than...
So, using something like this to add low end to your sound is not going to cause you the problems later in the mix down you would get by boosting it using an equalizer. You're not going to find that suddenly you play a note down here and it goes brrr and sticks out loud. In order for you to achieve that thick sounding, and that's a struggle for a lot of people, particularly play a lot of solos, to get that really nice thick sound in the high notes without it becoming muddy in the low. So this device does its job perfectly. It's exactly what it's designed for. It's a great deal of fun to play with. It opens up all kinds of new possibilities with every kind of cabinet, and it really just destroys that notion that you can't use a Greenback for metal, say, because it doesn't have enough bass, or any combination of those terms. You can come up with any speaker. You have now the full range of positions and microphones and tools to be able to extract any frequency you want from any speaker, and all the packs obviously will contain the Neutron sub, as well as the microphones that we choose to be the best ones to represent the sound of that speaker. So there's really now, hopefully, a possibility that we can get beyond the tranches, the lanes that we've cut for ourselves with, oh, you're making metal, you need a vintage 30, and you need an SM57 or a 121 or an MD421 or whatever it is that you decide you've seen enough people tell you should always do, that you're then going to do every time. Like, try and get out of that and get into this idea of experimentation is the real answer. Using your ears is the real answer. Having the tools to be able to do the thing you want without having to go to the extremes of using EQ to get there. Allowing yourself to play with this to the point where you can be like, oh, there we go. That's what I hear in my head.
Yeah.
That's the sound I want. And you're doing it with the raw source, which is not going to cause you the phase and EQ problems you're going to get. Sorry, the phase and frequency irregularity problems you're going to get using EQ to get that sound, which of course you can do. You can tweak an equalizer until your ears tell you it sounds how you want, but that's not linear. You start playing then, and maybe that thing that you were doing it to with the EQ at the time sounded good in its context. You go up the other end of the instrument, and all of a sudden you're going to be like, that's a problem. Better EQ it some more. And then again, you're going further away from where you want it to be. So this is the way.
Yeah.
This is the way. This is how we used to do it.
Yeah. And I think from going, and I've even seen some of the really nice GUIs where you've got the different speakers and the mic positions and things like that. And what I think we need to try and all get away from together is I'm going to keep clicking until I go and find something in here.
If you're in a real recording studio with a real engineer and real microphones, there's no GUI.
Well,
just the channels.
The thing is, what you're now going to be able to do is you're going to be able to go into it and say, right, I'm recording this type of music.
Yeah.
And this is the type of vibe that I'm going for.
I want this kind of sound.
And these are the sounds that I'm going to build. And then when you need to change it because it's not quite perfect, you don't have to go and find another one. Just move it.
Just like as we used with our analogy earlier, I want a spicy curry.
Yeah.
I need chilies.
Yeah.
I need rice.
Yeah.
I need meat. I need these spices. These are the kind that will work well with this dish that I want to make. Learning and understanding these, I believe, rudimentary and quite a short list of tools required in order for you to be able to build any one of those sounds. It's worth your time. You are worth spending just a bit of time learning how these building blocks work rather than constantly being spoon-fed somebody else's preference and being like, well, close enough, or I don't want to do it for myself because I could never do that, or I don't know how to do that. It's actually much more simple than you think it is when you understand the building blocks at play. It's really just brighter, darker, closer, further away. You intrinsically as a human animal understand how something sounds when it's further away from you than it does when it's really close.
Yeah.
You understand bright and dark. You understand, context. You know what you want from the sound that you're trying to make. There's no reason why you shouldn't be doing this stuff for yourself. And these are the tools you need to do that. If you were in a real recording session, these are the things that the engineer would be presenting you as the guitar player as your choices. This microphone, here's what I think is going to sound great. What do you think? It's okay. It could be a bit brighter. Or can we have a bit of room in that? Those are the things you would interact with the professional in that way, and they would get you what you want using their skill and knowledge. So let us be that for you. All right, you're going to have to turn things up and down, but we've already put things in the ideal places. We've already used the right tools to capture it. We've put the right cabinet in the right space with the right mics in the right position. All you then need to do is be literally blending that stuff together and deciding, okay, there we go. That's my thing. That's what I want. That's what I want to hear. So we're going to teach you over the course of the next 2 videos how to get from this basic understanding of what's in the pack to a full understanding of how you can create almost any sound you want using these raw materials, even the really advanced stuff. Again, a lot of that is called advanced because it's very difficult to actually record. It's very critical to set things up in a perfect way in order to capture it properly. But in order to actually utilize those finished recordings, which is what these profiles really represent, what you would get if you had recorded that microphone, all of that work has been done. You really only need to now interact with this as if it was something that had already been recorded. And you're going to choose how much of it you want and what you want to combine it with. So it's, it's really a new frontier that we're able to present things in this way. And again, we've not even really got into in this video the changing of the gain structure of the speaker, the volume of the speaker through the input level. I briefly touched on it earlier, but That's another infinitely variable thing that you can bring in on each individual part of the sound. So, you know, I don't want to go too far in this video beyond what we've done. I think that it's long. I know it takes a lot of time to watch these videos. We do have a lot to explain though, and I'm hoping that it will be valuable to you to learn these basic things in the longer term. For you to then teach a man to fish. Right? It's exactly that. You can constantly spoon feed people your preference and maybe be like kind of like the DJ almost. I'm the creator of impulse response. What I make is, you're buying my taste, and that's great. And we've given you some of those, but no one can ever make something that you like more than you can make for yourself, as long as you understand what you're doing and you have access to the tools that they would have access to. And because you don't need the skill to actually create those recordings in the first place, to decide which ones you like the sound of and how loud you want them to be, this is now a unique thing. It's something that anybody can learn in a very short time and become proficient in getting what they like.
Yeah.
Right? That's the kind of ideal. So I think that'll do for this one. It's probably quite long already.
Yeah. And remember, for all of those things that are not explained,
we'll explain them next time.
And for all of those that we can't, it's voodoo. That's it from us. This is Neutron One. I'm Jack.
I'm Stuart. See you next time. Hope that was fun. See you.